Walk Two Moons, Chapter 9, The Message. Just before we reached Mary Lou's house, Phoebe said, "Mary Lou's family is not nearly as civilized as ours." "In what way?" I asked. "Oh, you'll see," Phoebe said. Mary Lou Finney and Ben Finney were both in our class at school. At first I thought Mary Lou and Ben were sister and brother, but Phoebe told me they were cousins. Ben was living with Mary Lou's family temporarily. Apparently there was always at least one stray relative living at the Finneys temporarily. It was complete pandemonium at Finney's. Mary Lou had an older sister and 3 brothers. In addition, there was her parents and Ben. There were footballs and basketballs lying all over the place, and the boys sliding down the banister and leaping over tables and talking with their mouths full, and interrupting everyone with endless questions. Phoebe took one look around and whispered to me, "My parents are ever so organized, but Mary Lou's parents do not seem to have much control over things." Phoebe could sound a bit prissy sometimes. Mr. Finney was lying in the bathtub with all his clothes on, reading a book. From Mary Lou's bedroom window, I saw Mrs. Finney lying on top of the garage. She had a pillow under her head. "What's she doing?" I asked Mary Lou. Mary Lou peered out the window. "King of Kings, she's taking a nap." When Mr. Finney got out of the bathtub, he went out in the backyard and started throwing a football around with Dennis and Dougie, 2 of Mary Lou's brothers. Mr. Finney shouted, "Over there, and that away, and way to go." The previous weekend, we had school sports day. Parents were watching their children show off at gymnastics and running, and there were even some events for the parents to do, such as the 3-legged race and pass the grapefruit. My father could not come, but Mary Lou's parents were there, and so were Phoebe's. Phoebe had said, "The games are a little childish sometimes, which is why my parents don't usually participate." Her parents stood on the sidelines while Mr. and Mrs. Finney ran around shouting, "Over here," and "Way to go," and pouring cups of water on each other's heads. In the 3-legged race, the Finneys kept falling over. Phoebe said to me, "I wonder if Mary Lou is embarrassed because of the way her parents are acting." I didn't think it was embarrassing. I thought it was nice, but I didn't say so to Phoebe. I think that deep down Phoebe thought it was nice too, and she wished her own parents would act more like the Finneys. She couldn't admit this though, and in a way I liked this about Phoebe, that she tried to defend her family. On the day that Phoebe and I met the potential lunatic and then went over to Mary Lou's, a couple of other peculiar things happened. We were sitting on the floor of Mary Lou's room, sorting through a huge pile of old shoes and crumpled belts. Phoebe was telling Mary Lou about the mysterious potential lunatic. Mary Lou's brothers, Dennis, Doug, and Tommy, kept dashing in and out of the room, jumping over the pile of shoes and belts, and leaping on the bed and squirting us with squirt guns. Mary Lou's cousin Ben was lying on her bed, staring at me with his black eyes. They looked like 2 sparkly black discs set into big round sockets. His dark eyelashes were long and feathery, casting like little shadows on his cheeks. "I like your hair," he said to me. "Can you sit on it?" "Yes, if I want." Ben picked up a piece of paper from Mary Lou's desk. They back down on the bed and started drawing. Mary Lou asked Phoebe what she had written in her journal. "Nothing much," Phoebe said. The journal were a big topic of conversation at school. At the end of the last school year, apparently, their English teacher asked each of them to keep a journal for the summer. They had to turn these in to Mr. Birkway, the new English teacher, on the first day of school. Now everyone seemed enormously curious as to what everyone else had written. I was relieved that I had not had to submit one since I was new at the school and didn't know about the journal assignment. Ben said, "Want to see?" And he held his drawing over the edge of the bed. It was a picture of 2 figures. One was a lizard-like creature with long black hair that, as it ran down the lizard's back and under its bottom, became a chair with legs. Underneath this, Ben had written, "Salamander sitting on her hair." The other figure was a huge bumblebee with tiny little blue jeans on its legs and a short crew cut on its head. Underneath this, Ben had written, "Freebie." "Very amusing," Phoebe said. She left the room and Mary Lou followed her. I turned around to hand the drawing back to Ben, just as he leaned forward and mashed his lips into my collarbone. His lips rested there a moment. My nose was pressed into his hair, which smelled like grapefruit. It was his shampoo, I suppose. Then he rolled off the bed, grabbed the drawing, and dashed out of the room. Did he actually kiss my collarbone? And if he did, why did he do that? If I had not turned when I did, would the kiss have ended up somewhere else, like on my mouth, for example? That was a rather chilling thought. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered if I had imagined that it even happened at all. Maybe he merely brushed against me as he was rolling off the bed. On the way home from Mary Lou's that day, Phoebe said, "Wasn't it ever so loud there?" "At the Finneys?" I said. "Yes, at the Finneys," she said. "Where did you think I meant?" "You're just jealous," I said. "I am not. I'm just telling you that it seemed awfully loud over there." "I didn't mind," I said. "I was thinking of something my father once said to my mother. 'We'll fill the house up with children. We'll fill it right up to the brim.' But they hadn't filled it up. It was just me and them. And then it was just me and my father." When we got back to Phoebe's house, her mother was lying on the couch, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Is something wrong?" Phoebe asked. "Oh, no," Mrs. Winterbottom said. "Nothing's wrong." Then Phoebe told her mother about the potential lunatic who had come to the house earlier. This news upset Mrs. Winterbottom. She wanted to know exactly what he said, and what Phoebe said, and what he looked like, and how he acted, and how Phoebe acted, on and on. At last Mrs. Winterbottom said, "I think we had better not mention this to your father." She reached forward as if to hug Phoebe, but Phoebe pulled away. Later Phoebe said, "That's odd. Usually my mother tells my father absolutely everything, and I mean everything, including what the man at the grocery store said, and how much bread costs, and where you can buy a cheaper loaf of bread, and what sort of silver polish is better than another, and what Prudence said, and what I said, and all that." "Maybe she thinks your father would be angry about your talking with a stranger," I said. "Maybe she's just trying to save you from getting into trouble." "I still don't like keeping it secret from him," Phoebe said. We walked out onto her porch, and there, lying on top of the step, was a white envelope. There was no name or anything on the outside. I thought it was one of those advertisements for painting your house or cleaning your carpets. Phoebe picked it up and opened it. "Gosh," she said, inside was a small piece of blue paper, and on it was printed this message: "Don't judge a man until you've walked 2 moons in his moccasins." "What an odd thing," Phoebe said. I looked at the paper. At first I had the funny sensation that it was from my father, because he is always saying things like this. He's a regular book of proverbs, but the handwriting was not at all like my father's. Phoebe showed the message to her sister, Prudence, and her mother. Mrs. Winterbottom clutched at her collar. "Who could it be for?" she asked. Mr. Winterbottom came in the back door, carrying his golf clubs. Mrs. Winterbottom showed him the message. "Who could it be for?" Mrs. Winterbottom repeated. "I couldn't say, really," Mr. Winterbottom said. "But, George, why would someone send us that message?" "I couldn't say, Norma. Maybe it isn't for us." Mr. Winterbottom set his golf clubs down beside the refrigerator. He did not seem very bothered by the message. "Not for us," Mrs. Winterbottom said, "but it was on our steps. Really, Norma, it could be for anyone." "But, Honeybun, maybe it's for Prudence or Phoebe." Prudence said, "It's not for me." "But how do you know that?" Mrs. Winterbottom said. "I just know it," Prudence said. "Phoebe," Mrs. Winterbottom asked, "is it for you?" "For me," Phoebe said. "I don't think so." "Well, who is it for?" Mrs. Winterbottom said. Prudence looked at her father, who looked at Phoebe, who looked at me, and I looked at Mrs. Winterbottom. "We honestly can't say," Phoebe said. Mrs. Winterbottom looked extensively worried. I believe she thought it came from the potential lunatic.